gentlemen, we do not plunge headlong into folly on the orders of a single madman, but act according to our own collective madness.
Welcome back to Iron Knight's Ventures. Today the adventure is going to be putting together and converting a Space Marine from the Death Watch. We're going to be using the Phobos body to create a character inspired by Edward Kenway from Assassin's Creed, from the recently announced Assassin's Creed Resynced. As it's one of the games I loved growing up, one of the best pirate games ever. When the Assassin's Creed Resynced trailer came out, I was so hyped. I was so excited in order to do something with the concept of this, and as my current hyperfixation has been for a long time Warhammer, and kitbashing is my current way of expressing the things that I'm interested in. Everything, I figured that a kitbash for Edward Kenway would be very thematic and really nice with the new release. So I did have a little bit of concerns. Obviously, it's not a standard upload as far as YouTube and Warhammer goes, but also it's my channel. So it's already a pretty low-ranking channel. This will be my third video on the channel. Maybe a total of 500 watches at this point. So if YouTube hates it, what do I really have to lose? At least I get to do something I really want to do. So we start off with the Phobos body from the Death Watch kill team. I purchased the Death Watch kill team a while back when it came out individually. I was really interested in picking it up for the shoulder pads. There's quite a few different varieties of successor shoulder pads and even mainstream shoulder pads inside of the box. I do want to build some of those. A lot of the successor chapters that I've really come to like through Arthur Bone's videos and all those different lore videos that kind of explain successors made me want to build some of them. I really like his video on the wolf spears, and that was one of the big ones that I saw had a shoulder pad that was pre-marked inside of it. So as such, I really got excited with the concept of purchasing this and then using them later on to kitbash. I tried my best to keep the eye for the Inquisition together in case I wanted to use it on a different kitbash. I think I ended up accidentally throwing it away, but I'm trying to keep everything I can so that I have material for kitbashes later down the road. You never know what you might need in the way. Every hoarder's famous last words. But I really enjoy kitbashing, so hopefully this keeps on keeping on, Anyway, as we kind of shave off the Inquisition symbol, I would end up later regretting not taking off the pouches and the grenades, as here I start to use some Tamiya smooth cure putty epoxy putty in order to put together the kind of Assassin's Creed robes and kind of mock that, or kind of copy or emulate that kind of vibe. I'm planning on doing a relatively bigger project with that will be a Stormcast conversion. So working on this and kind of trying to figure out between this and Balthazar how to work epoxy putty so that it comes out well. I've also got these huge sausage fingers, so it's not easy, but I do have a larger project coming in, and so I would do all this work so that I can learn how to do it, because nobody goes into anything with the knowledge on how to do it, and then watching videos can only get you so far. In order to kind of emulate the Assassin's Creed hood vibe, I end up grabbing one of the Inner Circle companions heads. I've avoided using bear heads before in the past. I don't really like it, but as this is an Assassin's Creed character, he's supposed to be a little bit stealthy. The hood is iconic. I end up, and this one has a beard, which is very like reminiscent of Edward Kenway. So I decide that I'll test my hand at painting some skin. Grabbing the saber from the jump pack intercessors, I can almost see that like the arm's a little too big. I think for this model, probably due to the fact that it's a Phobos model and it doesn't quite line up with the gauntlet that's been installed on it. The gauntlet kind of makes it look a little chunkier than it normally would. Doesn't matter. I end up deciding that I don't like the pose eventually. Here I try out a few different arms. I got one where he's holding the gun across. I've got one where he's throwing the smoke grenade. Anybody that's played Assassin's Creed would remember throwing the smoke grenade to get away from everyone. I ended up not going with the smoke grenade, and I ended up kind of deciding that the arm wasn't quite what I wanted. So while I'm kind of test fitting it here, I really wanted to keep the saber. The saber was a huge part of why I thought this Kitbash would work, but it's not going to work with the pose. I kind of considered cutting the shoulder or the elbow so that I can make it do a pose, but this Phobos came with a couple different knife hands. In my head, I'm going to be playing this as a Phobos lieutenant with combi bolter, but in WYSIWYG, I'm just going to pretend that he has multiple pistols that he shoots at the same time or whatever, because I didn't really want to model Edward Kenway with multiple rifles, or with a rifle, so he doesn't really carry them, he carries pistols. But I kind of got this idea from another YouTuber that I've been watching recently. He really likes Space Wolves, and he ended up getting another copy of Jarl Windcaller, and converting it into a substitute for his Phobos lieutenant with combi bolter. And I really like that idea, so when I kind of had this idea to kitbash Edward Kenway into a character model, I thought that would work really well, as his pose with his double swords is just so iconic that I just love it, it's amazing. So dry fitting the hand onto the the arm from the actual kill team kit, end up doing like a hand in guard kind of pose so that it didn't interrupt too much. The Tamiya extra thin cement, as I've talked about before, takes a little bit longer in order to cook the plastic to the point where you can stick it to each other. And as I'm a relatively impatient person, it continues to have issues with sticking things and not letting things cure. But where there's a will, there's a way, and eventually just kind of like slapping it on there and making it work is my way. So it will end up falling off several times, do not worry. It definitely doesn't fit. I don't think that the key for the keying inside the shoulder is very good in the main kit, as this is the arm, I believe, for the Phobos lieutenant or Phobos model in the kill team, but it didn't really want to stay. It didn't stay where I was trying to put it. Usually when you have that keying in the modern kits, it really helps to press it in, but it wasn't really keyed very well to the point where I could get it to stay uniformly. But that also could have been my fault. I could have ended up putting all the epoxy in the wrong spot and covering up the keying, and that would have been my own fault. But the inner circle companion hooded head and the Kitbash together sword really started to catch the vibe that I was going for. The pose, this arm fit a lot better with the pose, so I was feeling a lot more confident at this point. But I don't know, the epoxy, the robing, I could not. I kept looking at the posing on the epoxy and just couldn't decide whether I liked it enough or not. So, moving on for now, figuring out whether I wanted which pistol. I ended up deciding between a heavy bolter pistol and a light bolter pistol. I think the heavy bolter pistol is from the Intercessor Squad, but I'm not certain. I am not certain. I don't end up going with it because I think I don't know if I might end up. So I have the only extra Phobos shoulder pads I have are from the Dark Angels upgrade kit. So I grabbed one of those out and put that on, immediately snapping off the arm as I proved to you that no matter how long you wait, if that connection's not very good, it'll pop off pretty easily. And then I try to get it to fit back in there with the shoulder pad. I should have dry fit so that I could make the putty more okay with the shoulder pad. I think that's a huge part of it, is that the shoulder pad does not like to go up against where the putty is cured. End up getting it fixed. I still can't really decide. I keep convincing myself as this goes on that I'm just going to really enjoy it more once it's painted. Like, I don't mind the Balthazar's cloak after it was painted, after it was primed. The little bit of like texture that was left behind in the green stuff from my fingerprints and stuff, that ended up not looking as bad as I thought it would once it was primed. So I was convinced. I do end up having to remove some of the epoxy putty and almost stabbing myself because I was not able to adhere the pistol to it. And I do end up going for a smaller pistol, mostly because I wanted the shoulder pad look that the Phobos have, where it looks like they don't have another shoulder pad. I actually kind of enjoy that, where it's like the thinner shoulder pad. I thought it fit the aesthetic a little better. Adding some sprue goo in order to even out the hand seam where I cut it, to avoid putting on avoid leaving a piece of the gauntlet on. I'm going to attempt to sponge paint it. I picked up, this is Uthwan Gray, so as I sponge paint some Uthwan Gray all over in order to get that kind of like sponge chop method. Getting full coverage isn't hard. This is a makeup sponge brush, so it goes into the cracks and crevices. I got a huge bag of them from Walmart of different weird sizes for like $3. You don't have to get the real expensive. But I keep dabbing it on, just a straight black Vallejo prime, and then I go at it with a cultist cloak. It's kind of a blue-black, or a dark purple-blue. It's like a dark purple-blue speed paint from Vallejo. I do not believe I'll be using this as my black scheme. I didn't end up liking it a lot. It definitely doesn't go well over the slap chop method. I guess if you were trying to go for a dark purple aesthetic for your Space Marines, like I know Jay from Eons of Battle, his Crusaders are very, I think he uses this color for his Black Templars. But personally, I am not as skilled as that man in the painting department. I try to get some red on here in order to kind of like copy the red, so the outfit that we're going for is like the captain outfit from the original Assassin's Creed. It was what I mostly ran around in, being an edgy little teenager. I forget that the colors are inverted at this point. I forget that the Raven Guard's color scheme for their shoulder pad is a field of black, and the emblem itself is red, so I make a red field. Accidentally painting a little bit of the backpack, I go in and just paint that top part red in order to kind of make it blend a little bit and make it not look like a mistake. It ends up not mattering too much. Here I do some highlighting on the sword so that when I put on the contrast paint that I use for my swords, it will kind of have like a cool underglow effect. I was kind of excited to see how the sponge painting on the sword looked at the end of the day. I kind of liked the pitted look, which I think if you were slap chopping a sword like for like a Kitbash where you wanted to use a regular sword, but it was for the Death Watch or the Death Guard, I think it would be a pretty good idea to get one of those and do some light sponging. But trying to clean up the lines a little bit, you can kind of see that like the areas where I didn't get the sponge in kind of has like some not so great transition lines. I hated it. As I kind of look at it, I try my hand at outlining kind of the cloak's edges, because as you could have seen earlier, he has a lot of white trimming in order to kind of bring some depth and such to the fabric parts of the outfit. The designers on that game were pretty good at bringing in multiple colorations. So I outline the cloak, which kind of just looks like I put pants on top of his pants. I decide that I can't do it. The cloak looks terrible. The paint job's not going on well. I just kind of decide that it's time. I failed. It's a failed experiment. So I grip my tweezers out, start tearing off little bits of the putty in areas that I think that it looks the worst. Pretty much ends up being everywhere that I put putty, besides like up on the edges of the model. Just pulling it off there, getting back to square one. Was not happy with any of what was going on, and I just it's okay to admit that you're wrong. These models are extremely expensive, and because of that, I felt that like it'd be a disservice not to show just the failure side of this video. So if you've watched so far, thank you for watching basically me trip and stumble over myself for the last 19 minutes. But I just couldn't do it. The model was not shaping up how I had it in my head. So I start back over, trying to do some more Tamiya. I'm going to kind of just wipe up some more and kind of try and learn from my mistakes. So this time I pre-shape it, kind of using the grid pattern from my self-healing mat to measure a little bit. His legs are about 2 squares high, so I end up making the rough shape of what the cloak looks like in the reference image. I end up making the rough shape of that and then cutting it. I did make the mistake here. I did not put down any kind of lubricant or oil or anything, and as such it sticks to my self-healing mat, and it ends up not working out. So I get some stuff stuck to my mat, unfortunately, ruining it a little bit. I'm sure I could clean it with some aggressive scrubbing, but for now, it's going to probably appear in the next few videos until I can figure out how to fix it. Maybe take a razor blade to it or something. But yeah, I tried to cut the rough shape in with my tweezers. I kind of forgot in my upset of being really upset with the outcome, I kind of forgot that I had the silicone brushes that I had purchased, and as such I kind of modeled it together using just kind of the tweezers, and it didn't come out amazing, but it's significantly better. One thing I'm learning from my trial and error process so far is that you gotta kind of use thicker than you're expecting. I tried to make it as thin as what I in my mind is fabric, and it clearly didn't work out. So this time I went back to the drawing board and came back with a lot thicker of putty. It looks a lot better now, in my opinion. Using some sprue goo to reattach the arm once again for like the 7th time, I think. We'll get a zenithal prime on it from the airbrush and try and start over from that. So we're gonna sand off as much as we can of the fingerprints, and then after a zenithal, this is what we got. I'm still trying to use the satchel, the occultist cloak, in order to kind of see what the results would be on more of a zenithal. That's how I usually paint. I just wanted to see what a sponge technique would kind of look like, and I hated it. So that didn't end up being the forthwith. I think I'm gonna switch out my brushes. I was kind of like, while I was painting today, I realized I bought Rosemary & Co. brushes a while back, and I've been using the brushes because I didn't really think that I've been using them for a very long time, and I realized the other day that I've been using the same like Rosemary & Co. brushes for like a 1.5 to 2 years at this point. Time is really not a very fluid thing or a very normal thing when you're working, I guess. I remember having way more of a grasp on time when I had to be places. So taking some corn red, I'm doing the trim on the shoulder piece, and then I'll do the Dark Angel symbol. I know that the Raven Wing has its own symbol. Doesn't see Phobos models as being part of the Raven Wing, which in my opinion, I think anything that should be kind of stealthy or scouty or anything like that should be considered part of the Raven Wing. It doesn't necessarily have to go fast. At least in my successor group, that's anything scout and not scouts because they're not technically part of the chapter yet, but anything Phobos or anything like that where it's kind of stealthy eliminators, anything like that is part of the Raven Wing. But I don't believe that's canon lore. That's just how I kind of self-picture it. So I do the same thing that I did previously and take the Ulthuan Grey and trim out the edges of the cloak. I do see where Eons of Battle kind of has a solid idea where he uses sculpting tools to cut in kind of waves into the cloak. I didn't really think about it until I had recorded all this video and I was looking through YouTube and I saw his Black Templars video where he used some green stuff in order to make up new models for his chapter or his Black Templars, and because of that I was like, oh yeah, god dang it. So I'll probably experiment on doing that in the next video that I put out. If you're here this long, I can spoil it a little bit. I plan on taking scouts and kind of dark angeling them using liberators from the Age of Sigmar line, the Stormcast Eternal line. So I'm going to kind of go back to kind of a lore-inspired scout instead of basically football pad scouts, which is what I think of them as. American football pads, Space Marines in American football pads. They kind of give me Blood Bowl vibes. If Blood Bowl was something I actually played, I think the Scouts would fit in there a lot better. But so I don't really like them. Never really played football, never really enjoyed football. So in order to kind of copy the sash look of the red sash look from the reference image, I paint the belt all red. I normally wouldn't. I think it looks better black with like a buckle color, but I did not really know what to do for the back sash, and then I noticed the Necron head. And I know that one of the Necron dynasties, like their color scheme is a red head with a silver body. So while looking, I kind of decide that that's kind of what this guy was fighting. He's fighting like he took the head of one of those Necrons and strapped it as like a trophy, or he's bringing it back to HQ for information, something like that. So that allowed me to kind of get that red splash in there from the reference image, and also kind of break up all of the black on the back without just having it just be a big smear of brown leather, which I do end up doing here near the end. But this way I kind of get the reference images, I get a nod to the reference image while also still pertaining to the lore as closely as I possibly can. Sticking to the lore is something I like to do, especially in Warhammer 40k, where like the lore is what you kind of make it in most regards, but there is areas where like it is kind of hard and fast. So next I'll be working on the underarms. In the reference image, you kind of see that he's got some white sleeve poking out from underneath the armoring in his robes, in his Assassin's Creed robes. So I picked those out so that he can kind of resemble it. It also adds a little bit of splash of color into the model that isn't really there. The issue with black is that, as several videos kind of have talked about, it's kind of boring. While I kind of don't hate the blue-black that the cultist cloak has given it, the lack of other colors kind of restricts. I will say that my brush is a little bit scrappy at this point, and as such I do notice that I get a lot of overpaint in areas that I do not intend to. But I think I'm going to switch them out. I'm getting a lot of hooking and stuff, so I want to switch that out. It's definitely not going to end up being my cleanest paint scheme I've ever done. The robes that I sculpted are not going to allow for very much detail. The robes have kind of a little bit of an issue with like accepting the detail, as they're just kind of a smooth fabric. I didn't really like do anything with them to give them the vibe of like actual fabric. They kind of just look like big lumps right now. I did kind of try to like score in like the trim, where the trim would be, so that I'm kind of following that right now, but I don't know how it's really coming out. But you know, took off camera, I took the opportunity, my camera died, so you missed a little bit of painting where I took and painted the sword and the face a little bit and put some Bad Moon's yellow onto the beard, so that he could have that like blonde beard aesthetic. I don't know if I've actually done the sword yet. It doesn't look like it. I am cleaning up the line work a little bit on the edges, kind of trying to make it look like there's more of a hard transition. So now I'm going in with Dryad bark from Citadel Color and kind of picking out all of the leather details to kind of add a little bit more color. I don't end up falling in love with the red chest plate. I personally wish that I could have made him a red Corsair. I think it would have fit a little more thematically, but as I don't really have the finances or currently the desire to pick up the Red Corsair box with the 11th edition coming out. At some point I've thought about it, but I've got enough armies in the wings, and mostly just working on the Space Marines has kind of stopped me from purchasing any more armies for the meantime. Do you plan on doing a Dark Angel successor? Chapter Master Kitbash with the captain that's coming out of the Armageddon box. I think that model's really nice, even if it is just like a chapterless version of the Space Wolf Huntmaster. Man, Space Wolves just have such good kits. I have thought about, part of my theme is kind of like going back to old Caliban for my successors. So as such, like, they have a hunt tradition. So I have thought about using some of the Space Wolf models in that line, but it is hard to separate the Space Wolves from like the Space Wolf models from like their Space Wolf theming. Like the theming is very strong, which is great because it makes the models a really strong additions to the range, but also makes it hard to kind of kit bash with them. I do have a box of head takers that I plan on using for a few kit bashes, but all in due time. Kind of like cleaning up, getting a second coat on the trim work for the robes. I don't hate the epoxy work as much this time around. I will say the back, I didn't do as good of a job kind of cleaning up the back. If I had been able to do the work without the stuff kind of stapled to his back at that point, I think I would have been able to get a kind of a smoother finish and smoother layout on it. If I'd used the silicone brushes that I have, I probably would have been able to smooth it out a lot more. But as with me kind of like being upset at myself for the previous results, I had kind of forgotten that I had those. So after just a little bit, here I take some Corvus black and mix it with the Satchel speed paint in order to kind of do some highlights. I don't think that it really came out that great. Taking some Wraithbone to kind of like copy the kind of ivory colored pistols that the reference image is using in conjunction with the captain outfit. I think that it is a really good like comparison, this bone white with the harsh black. Chaplain colors is always nice to see on a model. So using the Wraithbone to kind of like bring out to bring out the color and add a little bit more color to the to the model without giving it kind of a too bright of a vibe. I think that the ivory, the Wraithbone ivory color was a good choice, and I think that it's a good thing that the reference image had it, because I definitely wouldn't have thought of it on my own. Taking a little bit of the Wraithbone and kind of putting it on the skin of the face, kind of like brightening up the areas. I had already gone over it with some of the speed paint Crusader flesh. That's why the yellow is kind of more dulled. I kind of put it over the face and beard in order to give it more of a dark aesthetic or like almost a shade wash. Now going in with some Fulgurite copper. The camera died at this point, so I used Lead Belcher on the back half of the sword and Stormhost Silver on the front, as well as the metal parts of the gun. At this point, I'm going to grab some Nuln Oil and give it an all-over wash. The model itself, while I don't hate it, I don't think of it as like doing so well. So when all else fails, take it away.
Eternal punishment awaits you, witch. Back to your dark masters.
If you enjoyed the video and you're excited for the launch of 11th edition 40k, please do the YouTube pleasantries in the or below the video, and remember, whatever happens today, make it an adventure.